think y'all need our good judgment. Welcome to 1,000-pound judgment.
Tend to include exclusivity clauses, morality clauses, and broad rights to footage, meaning participants often surrender significant control without realizing the implications, a reality underscored by lawsuits from past TLC participants who claimed they were prevented from pursuing other media opportunities. And while some states such as California have laws limiting the length and enforceability of such contracts, the legal environment remains tilted toward networks, making Tammy's rumored break both risky and potentially precedent-setting, because if she successfully navigates it she could inspire other reality stars to assert independence, while if she fails she could reinforce the cautionary tale that networks remain dominant despite the rise of digital platforms. And this tension is mirrored in fan reactions, which are deeply divided, with some praising Tammy for seeking autonomy and accusing TLC of exploitation, while others caution that without the structure of a production team she may struggle with consistency, recalling her history of health crises and setbacks, and this divide reflects a broader societal conversation about reality television ethics, where audiences are complicit in consuming content that often arises from participants' pain while simultaneously expressing discomfort with the exploitation they witness, a paradox that has followed shows like Intervention and Teen Mom as much as 1,000-Pound Sisters. And if we place Tammy's case within this lineage, it becomes clear that her decision carries weight not just for her own future but for the future of the genre itself, because if one of TLC's most bankable stars walks away and thrives independently, it could embolden others, and networks would be forced to reconsider their compensation and contract models to retain talent. Yet if Tammy falters, networks will point to her case as proof that stars still need the structure and reach of traditional television to succeed, and so the stakes are high. And while fans speculate about YouTube channels, influencer deals, and rival network contracts, the underlying question is whether Tammy can bridge the gap between being a subject of a network-driven narrative and becoming the manager of her own brand, a transition that has historically been fraught with challenges but not impossible, as evidenced by Bethany Frankel of The Real Housewives of New York, who transformed her reality fame into a multi-million-dollar skinny girl empire precisely by controlling her brand and leveraging her television exposure strategically. And while Tammy's circumstances are different, her awareness of the disparity between TLC's profits and her compensation indicates a similar recognition of leverage, particularly now that her weight loss transformation has reframed her public image from perpetual patient to potential survivor and inspiration, a narrative arc that networks often fail to accommodate because it reduces their ability to manufacture crisis. Yet audiences increasingly prefer stories of resilience and empowerment, meaning Tammy's independent content could resonate strongly if she chooses to frame it that way. And if we extend our comparison to the Faislay family from Faislay Knows Best, another reality franchise that faced collapse amid scandal and legal battles, we again see the fragility of network-controlled narratives and the risks when stars lose control of their image, and Tammy's case could serve as either a corrective example or a repetition of this cycle depending on how she proceeds. And in considering all of this, we cannot ignore the symbolic power of her potential departure, because TLC has built an empire on shows that highlight human extremes, from hoarding to polygamy to morbid obesity, and if one of the most famous participants of this formula not only leaves but succeeds independently, it challenges the premise that networks are indispensable, and this is why insiders describe TLC executives as anxious, allegedly pushing to secure Tammy with new contracts before she can fully pivot, because they know that without her, 1,000-Pound Sisters is unlikely to sustain itself, as Amy's humor and Amanda's drama may entertain but lack the depth of tension Tammy provides, and so, as analysts observe, Tammy's decision will not only determine her future but also test the adaptability of TLC's reality model, and in this way her rumored move functions as a case study for the evolving relationship between stars, networks, and audiences in the digital age. And what emerges from this analysis is a picture of high stakes on all sides, with Tammy facing the challenge of proving she can translate notoriety into sustainable independence, TLC confronting the risk of losing a cornerstone of its programming, and fans watching closely to see whether this marks the beginning of a new era in reality television where stars reclaim their stories, or whether it ends as another example of how difficult it is to escape the gravitational pull of the networks that made them famous. Tammy Slaton's rumored career shift away from TLC and the structure of 1,000-Pound Sisters is not only a deeply personal move but also a lens through which we can study the mechanics of reality television, the economics of network versus talent power, and the recurring pattern of individuals seeking independence after finding themselves both defined and confined by the stories producers choose to tell. And while this might at first appear to be a singular case involving one star, the reality is that Tammy's potential departure highlights broader questions that the industry has been grappling with for years, particularly surrounding contracts, pay disparities, brand control, and the long-term welfare of those who become famous under conditions they did not fully understand when they signed their first agreements. And to explore this properly, one must not only track Tammy's trajectory but also compare it to a range of parallel case studies across TLC and the reality TV landscape to see how similar stories have played out and what they might signal for her future. Because if we start with Tammy, we see an individual who entered the reality TV ecosystem as someone vulnerable, battling significant health issues, whose narrative was marketed around crisis, extremity, and transformation, yet over time her personal growth and changing self-perception have collided with a network model that thrives on keeping her fixed in the role of the struggling, volatile sister whose setbacks drive ratings, and the contrast between her real-life progression and the television template has produced friction. But Tammy is not the first to experience this, because if we examine figures such as John and Kate Goslin from John and Kate +8, we find that once they sought to redefine themselves outside the TLC format, conflict ensued both legally and publicly, with lawsuits, countersuits, and intense media coverage that ultimately damaged both the network and the stars, yet also underscored how difficult it is for participants to extricate themselves from long-term contracts. And similarly with the Duggar family of 19 kids and counting, when scandal engulfed them, TLC cut ties abruptly, showing that while networks can drop participants to protect their brand, stars often cannot leave on their own terms without penalty, raising the stakes for Tammy as she reportedly considers independent ventures such as YouTube, TikTok, podcasting, and even rival streaming deals. Because if she pursues these without careful legal navigation, she may trigger the same kind of litigation that has plagued others. And at the same time, Tammy's concerns about financial fairness mirror those of other reality TV participants across franchises such as 90 Day Fiancé, where cast members have spoken publicly about earning as little as a few $1,000s for entire seasons, even while networks generate millions through ad sales, syndication, and international licensing, creating a financial gulf between production profits and cast compensation that fuels resentment and drives stars toward independence. And in Tammy's case, this economic imbalance is particularly acute given the high personal cost of her participation, which has involved invasive health coverage, hospitalizations, and moments of vulnerability that became viral talking points yet reportedly translated into relatively modest paychecks. So her recognition that digital platforms could yield higher earnings is rooted in real numbers, since social media stars with far less name recognition regularly generate six-figure incomes through brand partnerships and ad revenue, while Tammy, with her millions of followers, has untapped potential outside TLC's cut. And if we compare this to Honey Boo Boo's family from Here Comes Honey Boo Boo, we again find a case where the network maximized profits from the family's eccentricities while the participants eventually turned to independent projects to regain financial and narrative control after cancellation, illustrating that stars often realize only after years of participation that networks have secured the lion's share of value. And Tammy's rumored interest in self-produced documentary-style content suggests she is aware of the contrast between her TV persona and her lived reality, as many participants before her have learned, because one of the most consistent criticisms of TLC and other reality producers is the heavy-handed editing that distorts character arcs, simplifies complex behaviors into villain or hero roles, and cuts context that would make participants appear more sympathetic. And if Tammy releases raw, unedited footage of her daily life, it could radically alter public perception. Much as cast members from The Real Housewives or The Bachelor have used podcasts and YouTube platforms to reframe narratives and challenge how they were portrayed on screen, and this struggle between network framing and personal storytelling is central to the current evolution of reality TV, where more and more stars are bypassing networks to go direct to fan, leveraging the authenticity that viewers crave but rarely find in heavily edited shows, which brings us to the second challenge Tammy faces. Independence requires not only control but also infrastructure, because while platforms like YouTube and TikTok provide access, building a sustainable brand involves management, legal support, and marketing expertise, and rival networks or streaming platforms may offer that in exchange for exclusive rights. Yet these offers often replicate the restrictive conditions stars are seeking to escape, as seen in the case of Nicole Polizzi, known as Snooki from Jersey Shore, who built her brand after MTV fame but later criticized network contracts that limited her ability to profit from her image, a pattern that suggests Tammy must tread carefully to avoid falling into a new cycle of dependency disguised as opportunity. And if we examine the legal terrain further, we find that reality TV contracts, especially those structured by TLC. Understood, I'll now generate the full rewritten exposé in a single continuous block of about 8,000 words, strictly in a neutral investigative tone, no headlines, no breaks, just one long uninterrupted paragraph. Here it comes. Tammy Slaton's possible departure from TLC and her rumored new career path has raised questions that go far beyond the fate of a single reality television series, because it touches upon the ways reality stars are portrayed, the financial arrangements behind these kinds of shows, and the broader issue of autonomy for individuals who find themselves at the center of programs that thrive on drama. To understand the significance of Tammy's alleged move in 2025, one must examine her journey from the beginning of 1,000 Sisters, a show initially marketed as an intimate, heartfelt depiction of two sisters struggling with obesity and fighting for their lives while working toward healthier futures. From its debut, the program had a dual focus on Amy Slaton and Tammy Slaton, but over time Tammy became the central figure, her health battles, near-death experiences, and emotional conflicts overshadowing nearly every other storyline. Producers quickly learned that Tammy's presence generated rating spikes,